Hello and welcome to another episode of The Wave, the Wonderful Alberni Valley Experience. I'm your host, Don Texan, and I'm bringing you another testimony, another story of a wonderful friend of mine who has her wonderful Alberni Valley experience. As far as I know, she's been here for about 10 years, and she's going to share with us today what it was like to come into this wonderful valley and begin her wonderful Alberni Valley experience. Please welcome Reverend Minnie Hornidge of the Alberni United Church. Did I say all that right?
You did, yes. We
Okay.
have some new language around that, but I'll save that.
Sorry.
Thank you, Don.
So, Pastor Minnie, you are the minister of the Alberni Valley United Church here. And a funny coincidence or interesting coincidence, you are on Church Street. Your church is on Church Street.
I know. It's supposed to make it easy to find us, but really it's a little
I had
hidden.
a hard time because you have to go through, I don't know,
Yeah.
detours and stuff like that. But you have nice signs all over the place, like on Argyle and here and there. So
We do.
I found you. Just a little bit of background why I invited Pastor Minnie. When I moved to Port Alberni, so this is a bit of my wave intertwining with her wave. Okay, when I moved to Port Alberni in 2015, one of the first things I did was look for a LGBTQ friendly church. And the only thing, actually the only one that came up was the United Church on Church Street. So we went there and I found it very welcoming and I was at peace. I said, "Oh yeah, I found." And then shortly after, there was this first picnic at a park nearby that the church, helped organize with a fellow named Colin Sinister. He organized the first big picnic, and United Church was right there supporting it and everything. So I'm so glad that I found you, and I'm so glad you are able to join us in the Wave in this episode of the Wave. So let's start off with what you told me about your called to Port Alberni. That's where it all began.
That's where it all began, yeah. So I was called to Port Alberni and started to explain to Don that I was born and raised actually on Vancouver Island, sort of in Ucluelet. So coming back here to the valley was almost like coming back home for me. And if you don't mind, Don, just before I go any further, I always want to acknowledge that I live, play, and work on the traditional and unceded territory of the Tishat and the Hoopachesset people.
Oh, thank you. I should learn how to do that as well in my opening of the way. But I'm new. I have an excuse. I'm learning. So can you say that again for the benefit of all the viewers? You are living and playing and having a wonderful Alberni Valley experience in the.
Okay, so sorry. I need to add in that having a wonderful experience on these territories, on the Tishat and the Hoopachesset territories. Wow.
Okay, and we're going to be talking about that as well in a little while. So
Sure.
so you were we start off with you were born in Ucluelet in Vancouver Island.
I was.
Mm-hmm.
And so was born and raised there, and actually married and raised our kids there, and moved away at a later date. And I received a call to go into ministry. So kind of when my youngest one was about 14, I was trying to think of what do I want to do with the rest of my life,
Mm-hmm.
So experienced that, and then for 5 years after completing my education, I was in kind of north central BC. Immediately before coming here, I was living on Gitxsan territory, so serving 3 small churches in that area. Lovely experience, hard to leave those folk. They have a piece of my heart. And then so I had a sense of call to come back to the island. My dad was getting a bit older, and I wanted to be closer so that I could spend some quality time with him. And so Alberni Valley United Church and I began a conversation, and it seemed like a really good fit. They were looking to do some kind of look at kind of a new vision, and visioning is something that I'm really quite passionate about, and I'm always passionate about reconciliation, so this seemed like a pretty good fit.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
So,
so how could you explain to us the process of how you were called to Port Alberni?
okay. So our process in the United
So you
Church is
decided to become a minister at the
yeah,
age of what?
50. I was
15? Oh my
50.
goodness.
I was
Sorry?
50. Yeah, I was
Oh my
ordained. Well,
goodness.
no. So I was 45, I guess, when I started education. But anyway,
Okay. So
you're
then
you're
you
you're
told me
making me
to,
give away my age,
oh
right?
no.
Oh,
Well,
I'm just
that's
joking.
on you, darling. I never ask a woman's age. Okay,
Uh,
so you came to Port Alberni, so I guess I missed a part of what you were saying because I was busy with fidgeting with some stuff on the camera.
okay, no
So
problem.
you came to Port Alberni, you say 10 years ago.
Yes.
So was that a calling or was it an assignment or what's the process involved in that?
That was a calling. So our process is that when a congregation is looking for a minister, so and there's of course ministers who are looking to make changes in what we call a pastoral relationship. So that's just a change in church. And so they were interviewing a number of ministers, and I was interviewing a number of churches. And anyway, they offered me a position to come and minister with them and serve here. So that's kind of the short story. I'm sure that's enough.
Okay. So you arrived in Port Alberni sometime in, so 10 years ago, it's about 2010.
Yeah,
And what month? Was it the winter? Was it the fall? Was it the summer?
summer. Yeah, I came in the
Also,
summer. Yeah.
so what was your, prior to your coming over to Port Alberni, did you know anything about Port Alberni, like through the internet, like what was being
Well,
said about Port Alberni?
yes, yes. Well, and I knew quite a bit about Port Alberni because of being raised in Ucluelet.
Mm-hmm.
So, so you know, I was pretty familiar with it in terms of from living there and understood some of the uh, history, the story, the dynamics, and yeah, so, and did some further research, of course, to find out what the church had been up to for a number of years here. And I knew that I was coming into the territory where the United Church of Canada had run a Indian residential school.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a sense of really being called to stand and live into the apologies that the United Church has made to Indigenous people and to stand and action reconciliation in any way that I could that seemed appropriate as I was invited in by the First Nations people. That was what I was thinking anyway.
So this was 10 years ago, and you told me, you mentioned you did a little bit of research. So
Yeah.
you found out that the United Church has a bit of history as far as those uh, residential schools were concerned. And what about Port Alberni in general in your research? What did you find?
Well, one of the things I found was that Port Alberni at that time was continuing to kind of experience a depressed economy, I guess is how we would phrase that. And that was quite interesting to me because my memory of Port Alberni as a child and a teenager kind of growing up on the west coast of the island was of this, you know, vibrant,
Mm-hmm.
fairly, you know, economically rich community. So I thought that it must be very difficult for people to make that transition away from resource-based industry into other economic measures and opportunities. So I was really curious as to how the community was adjusting because it seemed like just from reading about that, because I hadn't thought too much about it after moving away from the island. So that was really quite intriguing to me. And,
Mm-hmm.
mhm. And how the church can be kind of supportive in a situation when there's a kind of an economic recession going on. Those were some of my wonderings, right?
Mm-hmm. What about the environment and the people? What was your first impression with the people and your immediate surroundings when you moved into Port Alberni?
My impression of the people continues to be the same in lots of ways. And maybe if I can just tell a bit of a story, because that's easier for me.
Of course.
So, and my sense was encountering what we say about the valley, right? And there's just people with a heart. And I noticed that as soon as I got here, and people, just the way in which people welcomed my husband and I. And as I got more involved in the community, and I served on the Bread of Life Center board for 7 years, this community has a heart of generosity that is remarkable. It's just really remarkable, having lived in quite a few communities on the island and then several in the central BC. I just think when a call goes out and there's a need, the community responds so quickly and with profound generosity. It's quite amazing.
That's amazing that you should say it, because that's one of my experiences as well. I mean, this community does have a big heart, but I like the way you said it. A heart of generosity that is remarkable. I love the way you said it. A heart of generosity that is remarkable. It is amazing to be part of a community that has such a remarkable, generous, giving heart. Now, I'd like to go to another subject of discussion, because you did say, and I'm still getting educated on this matter, the Hoopa and the Taoiseach unceded territories, because yours was the first church I've ever attended where you did this blanket ceremony. And that was the first time that my mind was informed and open about what was going on in the past, and is still in the process of reconciliation, even in the present. I mean, like current present, not like way just recent present, but current present, and that there's still programs and activities and things that have to be done for reconciliation. So could you give me a little bit of enlightenment about the Hoopa and the Taoiseach, and what exactly does unceded territory mean?
Unceded territory means it's there's no treaty. So there was no treaty between the Taoiseach or the Hoopa and most of the other New Chalneth nations and the government. So there's in some ways what it means, if you just shorten it down, and this is my language, so pardon me if this is hard for people to hear, but it means we're living on stolen land.
Oh, okay. That's why you make it a point to acknowledge.
I do, and it's I think it's really, to me, it's really important to acknowledge this territory, which has been stewarded by New Chalneth people for probably 10,000 years or longer.
Wow.
And you know, and us, I call myself a settler, so I'm third generation from European descent, and so we've been here a very short time, really.
Mm-hmm.
And by acknowledging territory, I'm acknowledging all of the elders who have cared and stewarded this land, and acknowledging that that the colonial influence did not respect their governance and didn't respect their leadership and recognize their stewardship of the land. And it's a sacred, for me, it's really sacred to acknowledge land and territory.
So, in terms of government and political affiliation, where does that put us in relation to the federal government? You mean we're on stolen land? Okay, so I'm kind of like, okay, so.
Sorry if that's shocking.
So sorry, could you elaborate a little bit more on that? Are we still part of Canada?
Well, you know, that's an interesting, we are, of course, we're part of Canada. And yet I think it's just such an important conversation for us to have, and to maybe remember the stories that are told that before this was Canada, before it was even named North America, it was referred to as Turtle Island, so the whole of the continent, right? And so when I say we live on stolen land, I think I say that as much to jar myself as anything else, because I need to remember that. And I know that not everybody will agree with that statement, that it's hard for some settlers to hear that. But I think partly, well, I think because we're living in this time of, you know, where there's where we're more aware of racism, right? It's been revealed to us during COVID-19. And one of the really significant parts of our history in terms of racism is that this land you know, was taken away. People lived here, and
Yes.
the doctrine of discovery said that, you know, this was free land, that nobody lived there, right? And then there began, you know, this colonization of peoples. And anyway.
Okay. So let's move on to. I'm just very interested. Actually, I plan to do a feature on focusing on that because I just remember bits and pieces of that blanket ceremony. So, who put together that blanket ceremony thing? Was that something that you did in collaboration with the First Nations people?
So the blanket exercise is an experiential educational kind of workshop that was designed over 25 years ago by an ecumenical justice organization called Kairos. So at the time of when it was built and put together originally, there was consultation with First Nations uh, nations when it was designed. And then following the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report and the 94 calls to action, the exercise was then updated and local Indigenous people were consulted in BC. So when myself and Pastor Brenda led that service and other full workshop exercises that we have done together, we're using the one that has been most recently updated following the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action around education. And so there's always ongoing consultation with the leaders in the territory where that is offered. And the purpose of it, just for any of your audience who doesn't know, if that's okay, Don,
That's okay.
is to help people have an experience of the true history of Canada that many people say they didn't learn anything about in their educational process. In the sense of they didn't know anything about from contact to right up until pretty recent years, really. And so to have an experience of being either an Indigenous person or a settler, there's different roles. So it's kind of, it's a little piece of dramatic theater, really, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
And so we go through the history of what happened in contact and how lands were taken away and how First Nations people were put on reserves and how children were taken away. So everybody plays a role, and we go through kind of, it's a historical timeline of what happened from contact up until now. And the different laws that were in place that enabled the land to be taken away. So people have usually a very visceral experience of, I didn't know that. I knew that in my head, but I didn't know it in my whole body. And so that history takes on a new meaning for people. It's been my experience of offering it for about 20 years.
Well, I must say that that has become that blanket ceremony that I attended on that day has like stayed with me since the day I saw it. And as far as you mentioned, it's educational and experiential. Mission accomplished, Pastor Me. I mean, oh my God! Like, I felt it, I experienced it, and I was educated for the first time in my life. I never realized because I too came from a country that has been colonized, and there have been atrocities and brutalities against the people, the natives who have lived in my country. But when I heard your story, oh my God, what we went through was nothing. Like was nothing compared to what they went through. And I was crying the whole time. I wasn't even crying. I was sobbing. Now I'm in the verge of tears again.
Yeah.
Anyway, but thank you for undertaking that. Like, because from what I understand, you came in to Port Alberni knowing all this, that there has been a history and there has work to be done, and you are doing the work. And God bless you for doing that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's a privilege to be involved, and a part of my wonderful experience here in the Valley is the relationships that I've been privileged to develop with some of particularly the Sashat people. That seems to be where I've developed some pretty strong relationships, and we've done what I think is some amazing work together in terms of outside of the blanket exercise. And most recently, our endeavor has been kind of a workshop called Decolonizing Practices. and which there are.
Oh, say that again. That's a beautiful term, decolonizing practices. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
So decolonizing practices is it's a workshop that was designed by Michelle Nahaney, and she's a Squamish matriarch. And really it's kind of another experiential workshop, and it has a game board which is built on with Squamish teachings, but it's built on the game board Snakes and Ladders. But really
it's very interesting.
It's fun and it's interesting and it's powerful, and I think it's even more powerful, Dawn, than the blanket exercise. And maybe that's because it's designed completely by First Nations elders and has embedded all their teachings into it. But one of Michelle's key points whenever I'm in conversation with her, it's she's trying to help people get on the board. Like we know enough about the history that all of us as Canadians, and settlers in particular, can be involved in action. So we need to get on the board and, you know, kind of like play the game and be right in there, right? Not to wait or think we don't, there's nothing we can contribute, but to keep learning. So part of it for settlers is to keep doing our own learning. So, and not expect First Nations people to be educating us, that we need to kind of get fully in the game and learn, you know, learn our history more deeply. And so it's called Decolonizing Practices, and I actually have a small group coming up where we're going to think about this together. But Michelle says that before we can actually do the work of reconciliation, we need to decolonize ourselves, that we all have a mind that's been colonized. And so much of it is just habitual, right? We don't even think.
I'm just laughing a little bit. Like we need a colonoscopy
Of our brain, maybe.
Yeah, I know. Because you said the word decolonize. That's another word for colonoscopy, maybe.
You're so funny.
But we do. I think the issue of racism boils down to ignorance, or a lack of education, or a lack of awareness that, you know, in spite of the color, we're aware of the color of skin, but we're not aware of the, you know, the systemic racism that's going on that's related to the color of the skin because of ignorance, because of unawareness.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. And I think myself and Alberni Valley United Church, we're committed to education. So wherever we can contribute some opportunities for people to be kind of in the game fully, or to create safe spaces where people can learn and have those conversations, because everybody has their own fear that they bring to the topic, right?
Oh, exactly.
Yeah, and I think we were clearly shown that by the calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and one of the significant calls that applies to at least the United Church of Canada is to be involved in education, to not stop providing opportunities for people to learn. So I think your naming of it's about ignorance is absolutely right, and it's nobody's fault, right? Because you know, this education wasn't part of the school system when I went through, or when my children were in public schools, but it is now, right? It is now, and there's Aboriginal and Indigenous content in all grade levels. Isn't that fabulous?
I know, but you know, at least it's not too little, too late yet. I mean, I'm glad it's. But the thing is, with me, is like when I was listening to the blanket ceremony, and they were putting timelines on it. And it was like only then, like 2000. What? I mean, they're only doing it now. I mean, just recently. I mean, I was surprised. I mean, this has been going on for hundreds of years. It's only now that there's strides and efforts and actions being undertaken to correct the whole wrongful thing that has been done from the beginning anyways.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for sharing this with me. I mean, I hope the viewers get enlightened and will do their own research and do their own awareness and education. Now, another group, of course, like we're talking about the indigenous people, another group that you're working with and helping to create a safe place and understanding and acceptance is the LGBTQ community. So could you tell me about that, you and the church and the LGBTQ community?
Okay. Well, I'll go back to 2015, if that, just to tell a bit of the story. So in the United Church, there's a process that congregations may choose to journey through to become what we call an affirming congregation, which is a congregation who commits to inclusivity of all peoples, no matter the sexual orientation or gender expression. And it's at least a 1 year, often a 2-year discernment and educational period before a congregation makes votes as to whether to become an affirming congregation. And if we're an affirming, to become an affirming congregation, you need an action plan as to how you're going to action that and create this safe place for in relationship with LGBTQ community. So that happened for Alberni Valley United Church in 2015, and it was in conjunction, it was in June of 2015, actually. So, and our relationship
It's so funny that you should say that because I moved to Port Alberni in 2015 of June.
Isn't that interesting?
It's very interesting. Like, I moved to Port Alberni 2015 of June, and you became an affirming congregation at that point in time. Please continue.
So we have this acronym that we call PI, which is public, intentional, and explicit. So that's what we want to be in terms of being an ally, creating safe place for LGBTQ, or we also sometimes use the acronym SOGI. So there are several times a year where we have particular services which are very focused on kind of like a celebration and an educational opportunity, because what we found is just as we were talking about, you know, the need for education in the matters of reconciliation, the same seems to be true for sexual orientation and gender identity expression. It's education that people don't have, right? And which creates barriers and obstacles and fear and judgment. And so we're committed to several times a year to be offering both education and for our services to be a celebration. So last year was the first year that the whole of the United Church of Canada, the first Sunday in June is Celebrate Pride Sunday.
Okay.
Yeah, so and last year we had a fabulous celebration because we didn't have COVID, and we almost had like a dance party for our service, and the youth helped organize it, and it was amazing, and just the opportunity for people said afterwards, some people who just that opportunity to learn more in a safe place was really meaningful for them. And of course this year we couldn't gather in the church, but we did, you know, do a dance party outside and chalk the sidewalk, which you came to, so that was lovely. Yeah, it was beautiful. And we're working with a transgender ally who was going to come in June to offer an allyship workshop, which of course we've had to postpone until at least September or maybe even later. So that's kind of our next focus of what we'd like to offer as an opportunity, both for our own growth and for anyone in the community who would like to come and learn in a safe place.
Oh, that's so wonderful. I'm discovering so many wonderful stories. Too bad COVID's in. Oh, I'd rather be in your church tomorrow. Oh, on Sunday. So how is the church, how is the church adjusted, and how is the church coping in the present situation of the pandemic?
Well, the church has coping really well. So we've pivoted and moved everything we do basically online. So we have lots of Zoom gathering. We have established what I call a virtual neighborhood. So there's, you know, something almost every day of the week where people can check into if they want. And of course, before COVID, we were already live streaming our services. So we've just continued to do that and kind of pushed ourselves forward just to kind of I guess for myself anyway, to be a little bit more skilled at being on camera, because that's not my background. I could take lessons from you, Don.
I will gladly help you out, of course. We are setting up Zoom meetings and tapings, and we are coming out with a show. Aside from the wave, I am developing a new show that's going to be called Queer View Mirror. It's all about queer people, for queer people, and by queer people.
Fabulous. That sounds educational and fun, maybe.
Oh, yes. So I want to, at this point, I would like to focus on you, Pastor Minnie, darling. What is your, like the cherry on your parfait as far as your wonderful Alberni Valley experience is concerned? You've been here for 10 years, and if you were to sum it all up, how would you say it?
Well, that's a hard thing.
I know there's lots of stories, and sort of like to encapsulate, like what you said with, how do you say it again? Amazing, or no, generous heart that is remarkable.
I don't know if I can say anything more than that, Dawn. I mean, I think that is absolutely true. And I think the other part of my wonderful experience is all of the people and organizations that I've connected with over the years, of people who are willing to risk and to step into courageous conversations about things like racism and healing, and how can we kind of create relationships of equity together. There's an amazing group of people here who are digging deep into those conversations and wondering how we can action that forward. And again, that doesn't happen everywhere in my experience, but maybe I'm just really fortunate and I came here at the right time. And I just think of a highlight for me, I always say, is the time that I previously spent at the Bread of Life Center, and the people there that I've gotten to know, and they share their hearts. They share their hearts with one another, and they shared them with me. And so many beautiful stories of that people are just willing to open their hearts to one another. It's all part of the same thing, right?
Yes. Well, I like what you said just a few minutes ago, and I think that should encapsulate what your wonderful Alberni Valley experience is all about. It's your effort, your energy, and your dedication to building equitable relationships. I mean, that's something that's not an everyday thing. Not even, that's not thought of by everybody. Building equitable relationships, and that will sort of like bring our earth, our world into a better place and a better way of coexisting together. It has to be an equitable relationship across the board, regardless of skin color, regardless of sexual orientation or gender expression, as she has said it. Thank you so much, Pastor Minnie. I have been blessed by your interview. Thank you so much. And I hope people listening would learn and continue to educate themselves and build equitable relationships, because that's what it's all about. Life is all about building equitable relationships. That's all the time we have for the day. Thank you again, Pastor Minnie, for being with us.
You're welcome.
We'll catch you next time on The Wave.